Good evening, friends. Tonight, we're going back to the World War II era to take a look at an ordinary German soldier in that army famed for its invincible blitzkrieg. What exactly did he eat every day? Now dim the lights, and with the tolling of the bell, let's step into tonight's story together. You straighten your body, trying your best to look like a soldier rather than the farm boy who just said goodbye to his mother yesterday. The quartermaster is bellowing at the front of the formation, while you're busy inspecting your newly issued gear. The most eye-catching item, of course, is that canvas hip bag. Its German name is quite straightforward. "Ich brauche bread bag." The name alone spoils its most important function. In the years to come, you'll discover that on the battlefield, you might temporarily go without your rifle, but you absolutely cannot go without your bread bag. You flip open the small canvas flap, and inside, your welcome gift has already been packed. This isn't some lavish banquet, it's your most basic daily wage as a soldier, your daily rations. The first thing you feel is a heavy, paper-wrapped hunk of something. This will be your best friend in the future, and also the enemy you despise most. Military black bread. You give it a squeeze. It's extremely dense, almost like a moist brick. The thing is made from rye flour, mixed with a bit of whole wheat. It was designed to keep for a very long time, so long you suspect it uses the same preservation technology as your rifle. Right next to the bread are several small cans. You pick one up. The label reads lard meat. You shake it and feel semi-solidified fat and some chunks of meat inside. Beside it is a smaller, flatter tin, possibly cheese, or possibly liver sausage. These high-fat, high-calorie items are meant to let you quickly replenish energy during intense marches. The officers tell you these are to be spread on your black bread. You also find a small packet of hardtack, the sole purpose for which they seem to have been manufactured is to test the limits of human dental endurance. Then, there's a small bag of coffee powder, but you give it a sniff, something's not right about the smell. The veteran next to you curls his lip and tells you this stuff is made from roasted acorns, barley, and chicory root, ground into powder and has absolutely nothing to do with real coffee bean. That's everything you own. According to 1939 standards, you should receive approximately 750 grams of bread per day, 120 grams of sausage or canned meat, some fat, butter, or lard, plus that packet of fake coffee and a few cigarettes. The total caloric count comes to roughly 600 kilocalories. For field rations, it could reach 500 kilocalories. In 1939 Europe, these are practically luxurious numbers. You should know that German civilians back home averaged only a little over 500 kilocalories per day, and that number was declining. Meanwhile, in occupied Poland, civilian daily caloric intake was suppressed to a pitiful 855 kilocalories. The black bread in your hand is already a privilege. You stuff everything back into the bread bag. What you don't know is that what you've just received may well be the highest quality, most generous ration you'll get in your entire military career. The bread bag itself is a rather interesting piece of design. It has an extremely high screen time in Hollywood movies and has become practically one of the hallmarks of the German military. It's usually hung on your right rear hip, alongside your canteen and mess tin. It's not just your mobile convenience store, it's also your junk drawer. You'll stuff personal items in there, extra ammunition, odds and ends. And of course, apples or potatoes you've pilfered from the fields along the way. The quartermaster says the contents of the bread bag are cold rations, what you gnaw on when there's no way to cook. And as a soldier, you are entitled every day, at least in theory, to one hot meal. You're just thinking about this when, from the distance, comes the clatter of metal and the hissing of steam. What about a rich aroma of meat, potatoes, and onions overpowers every other smell in the camp? The veteran next to you lights up and nudges you, kid. Smell that? The WWII is here. You inhale deeply through your nose. It's an aroma you can't find in any bread bag, one full of human warmth. It smells like whatever mom stewed on Sundays, warm, rich, with the sweet fragrance of fat. You look toward the source of the smell and see a strange-looking four-wheeled cart, pulled by two horses, that has stopped in the center of camp. The cart looks like a crude steam locomotive. A black smokestack is puffing white smoke. Mounted on the cart body are several enormous metal cylinders, with firewood or coal burning beneath them. This is the wellspring of joy in your military career. The soldiers nicknamed it the Gulash the goulash cannon, and the nickname is perfectly apt. It looks just like a squat, stubby artillery piece, and the shells it fires every day, those steaming stews, probably boost your morale and your comrades more than any speech ever could. You quickly grab your iconic aluminum mess tin, the one shaped like a kidney bean, and rush over to queue up. The cook is using a long-handled ladle to scoop food out of the massive 175-liter insulated vat. Your turn comes. You hold out your mess tin, and a big ladleful of sticky, steaming stuff slaps into it with a thud. You look hard at it. This is the legendary Eintopf, the one-pot stew. This is the German military's national dish. Its core philosophy is to throw everything edible: potatoes, beans, carrots, cabbage, all manner of root vegetables, plus whatever meat can be scrounged. Beef, pork, or just a few slices of sausage into one big pot. Let it bubble away for hours, and then thicken the broth with a bit of flour or mashed potato. You scoop up a big mouthful with your folding spoon. It tastes surprisingly good. The potatoes are stewed to mush. The meat chunks are a bit tough, but have soaked up all the broth, and the cabbage lends a hint of sweetness. Before this, you'd been gnawing on hard bread and cold sausage for 2 days. This mouthful of hot soup nearly moves you to tears. According to German military regulations, the logistics department's goal is to ensure every soldier gets at least one hot meal per day. This meal is usually distributed at midday or in the evening, and accounts for roughly half of your total daily caloric intake. In the morning, all you have is that cup of awful fake coffee and a slice of black bread smeared with margarine. Dinner is about the same cold bread with cheese or canned fish. So the lunch delivered by this goulash cannon is the sole highlight of your day. The goulash cannon, its official designation, is the large field kitchen, is itself a masterpiece of German logistical thinking. It has been in use since the Prussian army era, starting in 1892. The design is remarkably clever. It can not only cook, but those large vats are also pressure cookers, capable of stewing meals while on the march. Moreover, the smokestack is well designed and can be laid horizontally to reduce telltale smoke on the battlefield. And if you look closely at the cart, you'll notice that one of those large vats is deliberately separated from the others. Do you think it's for stewing a different dish? No, that smaller one, usually a 50-liter vat, is dedicated exclusively to boiling coffee. That's right, this cannon serves a dual purpose. While it simmers 175 liters of potato beef stew, it simultaneously brews 50 liters of roasted barley and chicory root hot water for your comrades from the other vat. The German obsession with coffee is evident from this alone. Of course, enjoying all of this requires that you not be on the front line. If you're in the trenches or under heavy fire, this cannon absolutely cannot come anywhere near. That's when the unlucky ones get picked, meaning you, and a few comrades strap on those backpack-style food transport canisters and haul food from the rear to the foxholes on the front line, under artillery fire. This is no easy job. You're leaping between shell craters with dozens of pounds of hot soup on your back, praying you don't become the target of an enemy sniper. More often than not, By the time you get the soup to the position, it's mixed with a fair amount of dirt and has gone mostly cold. But you don't need to worry about that yet. You're sitting on the edge of camp, slurping your hot soup, feeling like you've come back to life. You even have the energy to tackle that tough customer you noticed when you picked up your gear, your 750 grams of military black bread. You pull that big hunk out of the bread bag, the military black bread wrapped in wax paper, and set it on your knee, taking a deep breath. This stuff is the true staple food of the German soldier. It's a completely different beast from the soft white bread you used to eat at the bakery back home. Using your bayonet, yes, you need a bayonet to cut it. You laboriously saw off a slice. Its color is extremely dark, a deep brown bordering on black. You hold it up to your nose, a strong, heavy scent of sourness and bran. This is because it's primarily baked from rye flour and rye sourdough, with only a very small amount of wheat flour added. You take a bite, and your first reaction is, this thing is wet. Its texture is extraordinarily dense, sticky, with almost no air pockets. You have to chew with everything you've got. The taste, very sour and a bit bitter. The aftertaste carries a hint of honey or syrup sweetness. You feel less like you're eating bread and more like you're gnawing on a block of peat mixed with bran. This stuff has been serving in the German military since the 16th century, and the recipe has barely changed. Why is it made this way? 2 words. Durability. This high acidity, high density rye bread has its mold resistance maxed out. A proper military black bread, well wrapped, can last for weeks, even months. For an army that needs to march long distances, this extended shelf life is 10,000 times more important than taste. Your daily allotment is 750 grams, one whole large block. In theory, these 750 grams of bread are to be divided among your breakfast, your lunch alongside the hot soup, and your dinner with cold provisions. The veteran next to you tells you, never eat too much at once. This stuff expands and your stomach eat too much, and your belly will inflate like a ball. You chew with effort, trying to use it to mop up the last bit of stew grease from your mess tin. Of course, you don't always get fresh bread. During the rapid advances of Blitzkrieg, the field bakeries in the rear simply can't keep up. So what you get more often is bread in its prehistoric form, hardtack. You fish out the hardtack from your bread bag. It looks like a thin sheet of fiberboard covered in tiny holes, pressed and baked from whole wheat flour. You break off a piece and put it in your mouth. The crunch is alarmingly loud. You feel your teeth staging a protest. This stuff is crisp, but how to describe it? It's a wholehearting kind of crisp. It has virtually no flavor, just a pure, dry taste of bran. Its reason for existing seems to be providing dietary fiber, and, while you chew it, generating enough noise to give away your position to the enemy. You sigh and soak the remaining crackers in your canteen, hoping to soften them up a bit. Regarding the bread German soldiers ate, there's also a widely circulated dark chapter that sawdust was hidden in the bread. This claim has been circulating since World War I. At that time, due to the naval blockade, Germany suffered extreme food shortages and was forced to add potato flour, bean flour, and even sawdust to war bread. By World War II, this tradition seems to have been inherited. A purportedly captured 1941 top-secret German recipe reportedly showed bread ingredients comprising 50% rye, 20% sugar beet pulp, 20% sawdust, and 10% shredded leaves and straw.WWII. You look down at the dark chunk of bread in your hand, and suddenly feel a tickle in your throat. However, to be fair, sawdust bread probably only appeared under the most extreme circumstances. Most of the time, the black bread you ate was simply unappetizing, but at least it was still grain. You're struggling to swallow this mouthful of brick when you suddenly remember. The quartermaster seems to have given you one more thing. A small package wrapped in paper, with a label printed with the manufacturer's name. You open it. Inside are 2 hardtack crackers with a slice of canned meat sandwiched between them. Good Lord, isn't this the German military version of an Oreo? Except savory and meaty. You shake your head and decide to just get through this meal first. You look into your bread bag, where yet another more mysterious item lies. A thick cardboard tube, sealed with wax. You recognize. This is your WWII portion, your iron ration. And the order you've been given is, unless the sky is falling, you are absolutely forbidden to open. Iron ration, the term alone, carries weight. It's not your everyday provisions. It's your insurance, the last hope in your pocket, when you've completely lost contact with the world. The officers warned you with an almost religious solemnity, absolutely forbidden to use. Only after your unit has been completely cut off from rear supply for at least 24 hours. And only with the collective authorization of an officer at platoon level or above may you open it. The thing sounds too mysterious. You can't help but be curious about what's actually inside. The history of the iron ration is far older than you'd imagine. The concept was essentially borrowed from the Prussian army. It's the fuel of blitzkrieg, the backbone of confidence when German forces break through enemy lines and push deep on their own. What you're holding is the small iron ration, the one every soldier carries on his person. On the field kitchen's cart, there are also 2 large iron rations prepared for each man, just in case. You tear open the tube seal. Inside isn't the large steak or chocolate you imagined. What you first pour out is 250 grams of dried hardtack, a kind of twice-baked, completely dehydrated bread slice, even harder than the hardtack you ate before. Its primary function is grinding your teeth down and providing carbohydrates. Then there's a 200-gram can. This is the core of the iron ration. You shake it inside is solid, packed meat. The label reads canned meat. This might be beef, pork, even horse meat, of course, in 1939. It's very likely high-quality corned beef or stewed pork. You also discover a small packet of coffee powder. This time it might be real. But in the entire iron ration, the most peculiar, the most quintessentially German item is the thing you pull out last. It looks like a short, stubby candle wrapped in red wax paper or some kind of industrial component. It's been cut into 6 small pieces, each one like an oversized pill. This is the legendary ersatz sausage. This thing is nothing short of black magic in German military food technology. It's a highly concentrated block whose main ingredients are pea flour, lard or bacon, salt, and spices. Its invention dates back to 1867, when a Berlin canning factory owner created it. During the Franco-Prussian War, it proved its worth spectacularly because it allowed soldiers to carry high-calorie hot soup in an extremely small volume. Its usage is simple. You toss one of these small pea pills into your mess tin, add water, then bring it to a boil on your portable field stove. Within minutes, you have a steaming bowl of salty, fat-laden, green pea flour mush. How does it taste? Well, as long as you're starving out of your mind, it's the food of the gods. It provides salt, calories, and a psychological sense of fullness. On a cold morning, this bowl of pea mush beats anything. So, to sum up your iron ration, 1 can of meat, some crackers that could double as slate tiles, and a pea sausage that can be boiled into soup. That's your last supper at the end of the world, ironically. The more desperately you need it, the more useless it becomes. By 1942, on the Eastern Front, when soldiers were truly on the verge of starving to death, they'd long since secretly eaten their iron ration. And when new iron rations were airdropped in, many men were already too weak to melt snow to cook that pea sausage. Now, you tuck this Last Supper package back into the corner of your bread bag. Early 1940, your unit has just finished the campaign in Poland and is resting on the Western Front. You chew on that tooth-achingly sour black bread, and your mind starts to wander. You've heard that if France can be taken, the food situation there will be a completely different story. You've heard that in France, soldiers live like God himself. Time moves to the summer of 1940. You discover that those rumors were actually true. After sweeping through Poland, Denmark, Norway, and the Low Countries, your unit is reassigned to France as occupation forces. You jump down from a mud-caked truck and step not onto the potholed dirt roads of Eastern Europe, but onto the cobblestone streets of a French town. The air doesn't carry the sour smell of potatoes and cabbage from the goulash cannon. Instead, there's the aroma of baking in the window of a bakery. You see something you've only ever seen in pictures, white bread. You can hardly believe your eyes over the following months. Your life as an occupation soldier can only be described as decadent. You discover there's an old German saying, Leben wie Gott in Frankreich, living like God in France. Now you finally understand what it means. Your rye brick stays behind on the supply wagon. Every morning, you receive a freshly baked baguette crispy crust, soft interior. Your tin of margarine has also vanished. In its place is salted fresh butter and brie cheese, requisitioned from local farms in Normandy. Your ersatz coffee can go to hell. For breakfast now, you're drinking real coffee, accompanied by boiled egg. The goulash cannon still shows up at midday, but the cook is no longer stewing the same monotonous potatoes and beans. He's pouring generous amounts of wine into the pot. French beef, fresh vegetables, plus Bordeaux, red wine, the flavor of that stew, makes you feel like what you ate back at the barracks was pig feet. The German High Command half tacitly permitted this indulgence. On the one hand, they needed to maintain the occupation troops' morale. On the other, this was also a form of showing off and plunder. The German military almost immediately began a systematic pillaging of French resources, especially food. You're sent to requisition supplies. You walk into a French wine cellar and are absolutely dumbfounded. Row after row of oak barrels and mountains of champagne. Under the 1940 Armistice Agreement, France had to pay 400 million francs per day in occupation costs, and these wines and foodstuffs were part of that payment. Your unit receives weekly perks, no longer a few lousy cigarettes, but a bottle of Bordeaux red or a bottle of fine champagne. You stuff the field parcels you send home full of French cheese, foie gras, and sausages you've purchased. You tell your parents you're living better here than you did at home. Of course, behind this good life, French civilians are going hungry. The better you eat, the faster the locals starve. The black market begins to flourish. But France's winemakers aren't pushovers either. What you probably don't know is that just as you and your comrades are drinking and singing, a wine resistance movement is quietly underway. French wineries, especially the owners of the top estates, employ all manner of cunning tricks to deal with you occupied. They deliberately splash water on their cellar walls and cover the bottles of mediocre plonk with dust and cobweb, making them look like aged treasures from a great vintage, then present these wines to the German army. Meanwhile, the truly fine wines say, the 1928 Lafite or Romanée Conti are hidden behind false walls and secret chambers. The owner of the famous Parisian restaurant, La Tour d'Argent, even had a wall bricked up overnight before the Germans entered the city, concealing his cellar's most precious 20 bottles. So that bottle of champagne you think is top-notch? It's very likely just rotgut the French are using to dupe you. The occupation force's corruption in France soon alarmed the top brass in Berlin. They worried that these soldiers' fighting spirit would be softened by cheese and red wine. This is also a point of debate among later generations. To what extent did this good life in France lull the German military, leaving them utterly unprepared for the brutal reality they would face on the Eastern Front? Some scholars argue that the heavenly days of 1941 in France formed a devastating contrast with the hell outside Moscow in late 1941. This psychological whiplash was an important factor in the morale of the Eastern Front German troops, nearly collapsing during their first winter. But others counter that this exaggerates the role of food. The real collapse stemmed from terrible winter equipment and the tenacious resistance of the Soviet army. Naturally, you aren't thinking that far ahead. You're sitting in a Parisian cafe, enjoying the sunshine, deliberating whether to have a glass of Chardonnay tonight or try that cheese called Camembert. You think this war might be over soon, and that as a victor, you can enjoy this lifestyle forever. But you soon discover that red wine and cheese alone won't win a blitzkrieg. You need something more stimulating. You're living the high life in France, but the war machine hasn't stopped. Your unit begins preparations for the next big battle, Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of England, or something else. Training intensity ramps up sharply. You begin long forced marches, around-the-clock exercises. After one 24-hour-long intense exercise, you feel you're about to collapse. Your eyelids feel like they're filled with lead. That's when your sergeant hands you a flat, round, red tin box. You open it, and inside are triangular pieces of dark chocolate, cut like a pizza. Eat up, the sergeant says. This is Eiflager Chocolate Pilot's chocolate. You pick up a piece and put it in your mouth. The flavor is rich, that slightly bitter dark chocolate, but with a peculiar, somewhat stimulating taste. You eat 2 pieces. About 15 minutes later, you notice, you're not sleepy anymore. Your heart starts thumping faster. Your thinking becomes clear, and your fatigue has been swept away completely. You feel like you could run another 10 kilometers. You look down at the tin. 3 words are printed on it: chocolate, coffee, cola nut. This stuff is the German military's official energy bar. It was launched at the 1936 Berlin Olympics as a sports chocolate, then immediately caught the military's eye. It contains a massive amount of caffeine from roasted coffee powder and cola nut powder. How high is its caffeine content? By some estimates, eating all 6 pieces of chocolate in that tin is equivalent to drinking 5 or 6 espressos. It was nicknamed Pilot's Chocolate because Luftwaffe pilots absolutely adored it. Before night bombing missions, they'd chomp away at it to maintain peak alertness. You quickly fall in love with the little tin too. Before standing night watch or during long marches, eating 2 pieces produces immediate result. This chocolate is still produced and sold to this day. The recipe and packaging have barely changed. You can still buy it now, but you soon discover that even the buzz from Pilot's chocolate sometimes isn't enough. In the spring of 1941, your unit is transferred to the Eastern Front to prepare for the coming Operation Barbarossa. You begin high-intensity blitzkrieg penetration exercises. Tank units are required to drive continuously for 3 days and 3 nights, virtually without sleep. That's when you notice the tankers and the veteran sergeants have something even more potent than Pilot's chocolate. During one exercise, your tank driver has been driving continuously for 40 hours. You see him pull a small brown medicine bottle from his pocket or a paper tube printed with a pharmaceutical company's logo shake out 2 small white pills and wash them down with cold water from his canteen. "What's that?" you ask. He flashes a grin, an unusual gleam in his eyes. "Good stuff. Its trade name is Japervitin. You may be unfamiliar with the word, but you certainly know its modern name, Methamphetamine, what we commonly call crystal meth. During World War II, the German military distributed Pervitin to soldiers on a massive, even systematic scale. Methamphetamine was brought to market in 1938 by the German pharmaceutical company Temmler. Initially, it was an over-the-counter drug, marketed as a cure-all for alertness, wakefulness, and combating depression. Students used it to cram for exams. Housewives used it to fight fatigue. Temmler even released housewives' chocolate with Pervitin mixed in. The military quickly discovered the drug's usefulness. It could suppress fatigue, hunger, anxiety, and fear, while enormously boosting confidence and aggression. Wasn't this the perfect soldier serum? During the 1940 Blitzkrieg invasion of France, the German High Command ordered 35 million Pervitin tablets, distributed to the Army and Air Force. Tank crews were explicitly instructed to use Pervitin so they could drive their tanks continuously for days and nights, punch through the Ardennes forest, and catch the Anglo-French forces completely off guard. The driver next to you, after swallowing his pills, becomes noticeably manic talkative and extremely aggressive. He watches the tank charge wildly ahead, humming a little tune. You're somewhat bewildered. All the way through lunch, he remains in this heightened state. After lunch, the cook pours half a mess tin of dark liquid into your aluminum container. The cook calls it coffee, but you're quite certain this stuff has absolutely nothing to do with coffee beans. You lean in for a sniff, a strange odor mixing scorched bitterness, earthiness, and a faint hint of sweetness. You take a sip bitter and astringent. What the hell is this? You ask the veteran next to you, who's standing and eating with black bread. The veteran doesn't even look up, muttering one word. Ersatz substitute. This is the drink you'll consume most frequently during your military career, and for years after the war. Ersatz coffee. What's it made of? The answer: everything that isn't coffee beans, but can be roasted and ground into powder. The most common recipe is roasted barley, rye, and chicory root. Sometimes, for extra flavor, they add roasted sugar, beetroot, carrots, figs, or even roasted acorns. What you're drinking now is probably the classic chicory root and barley blend. The chicory root provides bitterness and dark color. The barley provides a toasty, bread-like char-dotted. It contains no caffeine. Its only virtue is that it's hot, and you discover that the substitutes go far beyond just coffee. Everything in your rations is starting to be adulterated. You pull a small container out of your bread bag. It looks like jam, but the label reads "e marmelade," not "e confitura." You spread it on your black bread and taste it far too sweet. An overwhelming, one-dimensional sweetness with no fruit aroma whatsoever. This is because it very likely isn't made from fruit at all, but from sugar beets or some other root vegetable, cooked down with heaps of sugar and artificial flavoring. You've also been issued artificial honey not gathered by bees, but concocted from syrup and chemical. The butter you eat is probably margarine. The meat, sausages, by the mid to late war period, are stuffed with soy flour and grain filler. Nearly everything you eat is coffee-flavored, honey-flavored, butter-flavored, but none of it is real. At least your dinner looks like the genuine article: a slice of black bread and a small can. You pick up the can. The label is simple, printed with just one word: Fleischkonserve, canned meat. The term is full of that characteristically German, utterly unimaginative directness. It tells you everything, and somehow nothing at all. You pry it open with your multi-tool knife. A powerful, salty, meaty, fatty smell hits you in the face. You look inside. The can is packed tight with chunks of meat, soaking in semi-solidified aspic. You scoop out a piece with your spoon. The texture is quite tough, very salty, but it's meat. Real honest-to-God meat in your daily rations. You get roughly 120 grams of sausage or canned meat. These cans are your primary source of protein. But what kind of meat is actually in there? That depends on your luck and which theater of war you're in. In the early stages of the war, when the food was at its best, the can you open might contain roast beef, stewed pork, or even roast turkey or chicken. But as the war drags on, the contents of the cans start becoming mysterious. The label may still read canned meat, but the ingredients become a grab, bag it, might be beef mixed with pork, or mutton. On the Eastern Front, it could even be horse meat. You might also be issued something called Dauerwurst durable sausage. This is the pride of German sausage-making craft. These are hard, air-dried, or smoked sausages. They don't require refrigeration and can hang from your backpack for weeks. Of course, what you eat most often are the sausages that need cooking. The varieties are staggeringly numerous. Germans claim to have 500 types of sausage. What you get might be liverwurst, which can be spread on bread like peanut butter, or blood sausage. Don't underestimate blood sausage in the military barracks. Blood sausage is a prized item. Its fat content is extremely high, providing a massive amount of calories. On a cold morning, slicing a piece of cold blood sausage and putting it in your black bread, while it may sound a bit hardcore, can carry you through a whole morning of training. You sigh and finish off that can of mystery meat, just as you think your diet is already diverse enough. New orders come down. You've been selected, kid. You're going to a special place, a place with no trees, no grass, only sand and sun. You're being transferred to the Africa Corps. Now you feel like you're melting. This is North Africa, the Libyan desert, 1941. You're no longer the European soldier you're familiar. You're now a member of the Africa Corps. Everything around you has changed. You've shed the heavy wool uniform and put on a khaki tropical uniform. But you quickly discover that the greatest enemy isn't the British across the way. It's the environment here. Daytime temperatures reach 50 degrees Celsius. The exterior of your tank is hot enough to fry an egg on. But at night, the temperature plunges to near freezing. You have to wrap every piece of clothing you own around yourself just to keep from going stiff. And then there's the sand, omnipresent sand. It burrows into your rifle, your underwear, your boots, and your food. You open your bread bag. The familiar German black bread is gone. In this heat, it would sprout colorful mold within days. In its place is the completely dehydrated hardtack and cracker. Your teeth are in for more suffering, but you quickly discover that in the desert, the scarcest resource isn't food, it's water. Water has become the gold standard by which everything here is measured. Your daily allotment is strictly limited to 4 or 5 liters. That might sound like a decent amount, but don't forget, those 4. 5 liters include not only your drinking water, but also the water you use for cooking and the water for your truck or tank's rate. You quickly learn what it means to be frugal. You use a tiny bit of water to shave once every 3 days. You and your comrades start passing around a joke. In Africa, you can wash your face with coffee, but you'd never dare waste a single drop of clean water. Your meals have also become thoroughly Italianized, because the supply line from the German homeland to North Africa crosses the Mediterranean, constantly under threat from British submarines and aircraft. Supply ships are sunk every other day, so most of your rations come from your allies, the Italians. As a result, you're eating a whole bunch of things you've never seen before. Canned tomatoes, olive oil, and bags upon bags of pasta. Now, here's the problem. You're holding a fistful of pasta dry enough to use as a weapon, and you look at your pathetically meager half canteen of water. You're caught in a dilemma. Should you drink this water to stay alive, or use it to cook the noodles? The Italian soldier next to you demonstrates their special technique. They use a minimal amount of water, usually mixed with sand and olive oil, and cook the pasta into a semi-raw, gluey paste. You try it. Mm, at least it's cooked, and cooking in the desert has one very interesting battlefield life hack. Your vehicles, the trucks and tanks, their engines get scorching hot in the desert. So you invent a method of engine cooking. You pry open a can of meat just a crack. Then place it on the truck's engine block. Drive for an hour, and the meat and fat inside are heated up, sizzling away. This is much faster and more convenient than your tiny solid fuel stove. But on the whole, your meals in Africa are monotonous, dry, hard water starved, and never enough. The Italians' logistics are even worse than yours. They're often starving themselves. So what do? The only option is to take from the British on the other side. You take part in a raid on a British supply depot. You burst into their warehouse and can hardly believe your eye. It's stacked high with wooden crates, and inside isn't hardtack and old junk, but canned corned beef. You pry one open. This is nothing like yours. It's not shredded meat floating in aspic, but large chunks of pure beef, salt-cured, compressed solid. The texture is firm, the beef flavor robust. You also find canned spam, luncheon meat, beans, cheese, jam, and even tea bags and white sugar. You and your comrades, including the Italian soldiers, haul these British cans back like madmen. Capturing mixed ration boxes from the British Eighth Army becomes your only way to improve your diet. You discover that the British corned beef is vastly tastier than your own stuff. This envy and resentment toward the enemy's supplies is extremely common in the Afrika Korps. You don't stay in Africa too long either. You fall ill and are transferred back to Europe. You return to the German homeland to recuperate. You think you'll finally get to eat proper German sausage and stew. But you quickly discover you're wrong. By late 1941, everything has changed. You're sent to a new theater, a place that will make you miss the African desert. You're sent to the Eastern Front. You stand in a world of white. This is Russia in the winter of 1941. Outside Moscow, the wind slices across your face like a knife. Your overcoat, still the thin one you wore in France, is utterly inadequate against temperatures of minus 30 or 40 degrees. You feel your toes have already lost all sensation. You're hungry. You haven't seen the goulash cannon in days. It and your supply columns are mired in mud hundreds of kilometers behind you. Your blitzkrieg unit once swept through Ukraine and Belarus like a hot knife through butter. But now it has ground to a complete halt. You finally see clearly the German military's greatest secret, one that had always been concealed. You look behind you. There is no motorized column like you imagined. No rows of Opel Blitz trucks. What you see is horses, thousands upon thousands of exhausted, tottering horses. Your infantry division isn't some motorized unit at all. You travel on two legs, and all your artillery, all your supply, all your field kitchens, everything is hauled by horse. You finally understand. The Nazi propaganda machine showed the world the might of tanks and Stukas, but that was only a tiny fraction of the truth. This supposedly invincible German Wehrmacht in 1941 still relied on horses as its primary means of transport. In the invasion of the Soviet Union Operation Barbarossa, the German military deployed over 750 zero horses. Every heavy artillery piece required 10 to 16 horses to pull it. It's practically a joke. You charge forward in a tank, followed by a medieval wagon train. And now, in the winter of 1941, this medieval logistical catastrophe has finally exploded. These wretched horses like you have no winter gear, no adequate food. German logistics planning was based on the assumption that Blitzkrieg would achieve victory before autumn. They simply hadn't prepared the special fodder horses need at minus 40 degrees. So the horses begin dying in droves, like you. They freeze solid or starve to death. By some estimates, at certain stages on the Eastern Front, the German military was losing over 1.0 horses per day. When the horses die, your goulash cannon naturally can't keep up. Your artillery can't move. Your ammunition can't be brought forward. The black bread you eat is now frozen harder than stone. You need an axe to split it open. You sit in a foxhole, chewing your last crackers with a thunderous crunch. You start missing the canned food you ate in Africa, even that Italian pasta paste. Your bread bag has long been empty. The iron ration you ate it last week. That pea sausage, you speared it on the tip of your bayonet and roasted it over a lighter. You and your comrades begin frantically searching for anything edible. What did your officer say before you set out? Oh, he quoted Supreme Command's orders. The troops must obtain provisions from the territories they occupy. At the time, you thought it would be like France requisitioning wine and cheese. Now you understand the true meaning of those words. This isn't requisitioning. This is naked plunder. And behind it lies a plan whose name you've never even heard, but which is more terrifying than the war itself. You're crazed with hunger. Your unit storms into a Ukrainian village. It's already been ravaged by the fighting, but you charge into those crumbling wooden huts like a rabid dog. Your officer shouts from behind, "Any food you find is the property of the army. Solve the provisioning problem on the spot." You kick open a door. An old woman is huddled in the corner, staring at you in terror. You ignore her. You rush to the cellar. You find a small sack of potatoes and half a cabbage. You're overjoyed. You stuff them into your bread bag. Next door, your comrade finds a chicken. Half an hour later, outside the village, using a stolen door as firewood, you light a fire and throw the chicken, potatoes, and cabbage into your mess tin together, boiling them in melted snow. This may be the best meal you've had in a month. You might think this is just standard wartime procedure. Soldiers get hungry. Naturally, they take from civilians. But what you don't know is that your act of solving the provisioning problem on the spot is neither accidental nor a breach of discipline. It was planned. You, an ordinary German soldier, are unconsciously executing a scheme known as the I Hunger Plan. The Hunger Plan was a cold-blooded economic strategy formulated by the Nazi leadership before the invasion of the Soviet Union. The core logic of this plan was Germany's domestic grain supply was insufficient to sustain a war against the Soviets, and the Soviet Union, particularly Ukraine's Black Earth belt, was Europe's breadbasket. Therefore, after the German invasion, the food supply from Ukraine and Russia's grain-producing regions to other parts of the Soviet Union, especially industrial cities like Moscow and Leningrad, must be completely severed. The seized grain's first priority was to feed the German Wehrmacht fighting on the Eastern Front, that is, you. The second priority was to ship it back to the German homeland to feed German civilians. As for the Soviet civilians whose food was taken, what would happen to them? The answer: let them starve to death. This plan was laid out in plain terms in a memorandum dated May 2nd, 1941, and in Goering's green folder. Nazi economists coolly calculated that if the German military were to solve provisioning on the spot, then millions of Soviet citizens would starve to death within the first year or two of the war. This is why your field kitchen could still fire up intermittently on the Eastern Front. Its fuel wasn't just firewood, it was also the local population's food. You might say, "I'm just a soldier, I'm just following orders, I was just too hungry." But your act of taking food caused devastating famine across Ukraine and Belarus. By some estimates, between 1941 and 1944, at least 2 million Soviet civilians died from this policy-driven starvation. What you seized was that Ukrainian old woman's last potatoes for the winter. But the execution of the hunger plan did not fully succeed. Why? Why? For an ironic reason. German logistics were too poor. They discovered that although they'd seized mountains of grain from Ukraine, they simply didn't have enough horse carts, trucks, and trains to transport the grain back to Germany or even to the front lines, just a few hundred kilometers away. Moreover, they quickly realized, if you starve all the farmers to death, then next year, who's going to farm for you? So by late 1941, the German military, in certain regions, had to slightly relax the plan, retaining a portion of the grain for local farmers, especially those willing to cooperate with the Germans in exchange for their labor the following year. But regardless, your survival was built upon the deaths of the local population. Your unit is defeated outside Moscow and forced to retreat. All along the way, you organize food German military slang for stealing or looting. You scavenge potatoes and sugar beets from village after village. And you even begin shooting locals' dogs to eat. You survive the winter of 1941. In the summer of 1942, you're redeployed south. Your objective is a city called Stalingrad. You think there'll be oil there, food there, but you're wrong. There is only hell. You're lying prone in the rubble of a factory inside Stalingrad. It's December 1942. The air is thick with dust, gunpowder smoke, and a certain rotting smell. You can no longer remember when you last saw a field kitchen probably a month ago. On November 19th, the Soviet Operation Uranus began. Their tanks cut off your retreat, you and the entire German 6th Army, roughly 300. 0 men are completely encircled. The last piece of black bread in your bread bag was finished 3 days ago. Your only source of food now is the air bridge Goering promised. Every day, you huddle in the snow, looking up at the gray sky, hoping to spot the transport planes. But they rarely come. The ones that do bring, not the food, fuel, and ammunition you desperately need, but left-footed boots, tons of ground pepper, and condoms. The logistical chaos has reached an appalling level. 6th Army Commander Paulus calculated that your hundreds of thousands of men need at least 600 tons of supplies per day to survive. On the best weather days, the Luftwaffe can deliver only 100 tons. Hunger becomes an enemy more terrifying than Soviet artillery fire. Your unit's rations are cut to the absolute minimum. Your daily allotment is 100 grams of bread, a tiny bit of margarine, and a bowl of thin soup made from rotten potatoes and bones. You begin writing a letter to your girlfriend in Vienna. You know this letter probably won't be sent, darling. This is the first mail we've received in a very long time. Food has become very scarce, just barely enough to not starve. The Junkers planes can't bring packages either, because other things are all more important. I won't give in easily, but right now, I truly can't hold on anymore. We don't know if we'll ever make it home. You begin frantically recording your cravings for food in your diary. You read your comrade Wilhelm Hoffmann's diary entry. December 26. The horses have all been eaten. Yes, your logistics. Those horses that once pulled the artillery and field kitchens have become your iron ration. At first, the cooks still pretended to be simmering horse meat soup in the field kitchen. But soon, the horses were all gone too. I'd be willing to eat a cat, Hoffmann writes in his diary. Oh, they say cat meat tastes quite good too. You begin chasing feral cats and stray dogs through the ruins. Soldier Otto Segal writes in a letter that will never be sent. EA bayoneted 4 dogs, but still can't get enough to eat. I shot down a magpie and boiled it. You and your comrades now look like walking corpses. You don't have the strength to dodge incoming shells. You simply wander through the ruins, searching for anything you can stuff into your mouth. You cut the leather from your rifle sling and boil it in snow water, trying to soften it. You start eating the bread you used to despise. That legend about sawdust bread has become reality here. You don't care whether it contains sawdust or straw, as long as it fills your stomach. Hunger has utterly destroyed the last shred of your dignity as an elite German soldier. You ultimately surrender. You survive. You don't die in Stalingrad. You are airlifted out with serious injuries. You spend a year in a rear area hospital. You think the war is almost over. In the spring of 1945, the Soviets arrive at Berlin. You thought that having lived through Stalingrad, you'd already seen hell. But the Berlin before your eyes is a different kind of hell. The city has become a front line. Soviet heavy artillery is destroying your familiar streets meter by meter. You've forgotten that Hitler Youth children are hiding in subway stations and building ruins, waging the final street battles. Your bread bag is long gone. Your mess tin is gone too. Your only utensils now are your bare hands. You've had enough. May 22nd, 1945. Soviet tanks rumble over the cellar where you're hiding. You walk out, hands raised high. A Soviet Red Army soldier sees you nothing but skin and bones, and from his truck, where a field kitchen, much like your goulash cannon, is set up, he tosses you a chunk of black bread and a ladle full of steaming cabbage soup. You take it, you wolf it down. This is your last meal as a German soldier. You survived. The soup in your hands tastes rather plain. You've eaten French beef, stewed in red wine. You've eaten British corned beef in Africa. You've eaten horse meat in Stalingrad. You've eaten sawdust bread in Berlin. Your journey from 1939, when it began with a bread bag stuffed with 750 grams of black bread and cans of lard, to 1945, ending with this bowl of cabbage soup from the enemy.